Hi, Abhiraj.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good, Anurag. How are you? Sorry, a couple of minutes late. My last call spilled over.
No, that's good. That's a sign of being busy, of course. So, how have you been?
I've been very good, Anurag. How have you been?
Good. Things are good. Things are slowly getting back to normal on campus. So, we have a lot of students on campus here. The PGPX batch is here. Of course, not all of the PGPs are here, but still quite a few. But the
Oh,
classes
nice.
are all online though. Right. So people attend
Okay.
the classes from the dorm rooms.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And
Yeah.
social activity, is that happening?
So no social events as such, and there are rules about social distancing on
Hmm.
in the cafeteria and all the other eateries, and no large gatherings, right? So, but then people are moving around, right? I mean, just like in outside the campus. So that's how it is.
Got it. Awesome. Sounds good.
So, congratulations on being awarded the Young Alumni Achievers Award,
Thank
right?
you. Thank you so much.
It hasn't been long since you passed from IIMA. In fact, it's fairly recent, like in 2011, right?
Yes. I mean, it's been
Was-
10 years.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I mean, some of the campus memories must be really fresh in your mind. What do you remember the most? What are some of your fondest memories?
That's a great question. I came to IIM Ahmedabad straight from IIT Kanpur. And typically engineering college, particularly in final year, can can get a bit relaxed. uh, in fact, by third year itself, if you've figured out the system, etc., things are somewhat relaxed. Final year is about partying and relative relaxation. So I think the first memory was just the stark contrast, right? I think it took the first trimester. I actually didn't know what hit me, right? Like it was, there was no time to breathe, no time to sleep, and even then you felt like you were only um, barely catching up and keeping pace. I don't think I ever heard work as hard, to be honest, in my whole life as I did in the first year of IIM Ahmedabad. So I think first year just goes by you, before you realize what happened, it's over. Um, in there is placements. I mean, you're barely on campus for 2 days, and your CV making has started. And then there's placement committee discussions, and then there's a whole host of these on campus events from a placement perspective. There's so much other stuff also happening, so many clubs. I mean, it was overwhelming, to be honest, right? So I think first year was, for me, I was quite overwhelmed. One of the things I thought was, okay, at least let me do well academically, because that is something tangible that I can focus on. So I did pretty well academically. I think I was ranked. I was one of the high scores. I was ranked 11 at the end of year one. Um, then you get the summer, but I made good friends as well. And had fun as well. Then there's the summer placements, which I did with BCG. But even before the summer, I opted for the placement committee. I ended up working very closely with Professor Mukherjee, Sarad Mukherjee, in the placement committee, and he became a pretty, I would say, good mentor. Still is somebody I'm in touch with, and he's written a case also on Urban Company. He's been a good mentor through the journey as well. In our time, we wanted to revamp the placement process, and we were imagining this new process called the cohort-based process. So, well, the second year was very interesting. All of it was spent um, in PlaceCom, and that's busy. That's basically a full-time job. There's nothing else you could do. We also did lots of conferences to promote the IIM Ahmedabad brand globally and in India. So we did a conference in Bombay, we did a conference in Delhi, and we did a conference in Singapore. And for the Singapore conference, the then director, Samir Barwa, whose son is also an IIM Ahmedabad grad, or I think an IIM Bangalore grad, and is running this company called Delivery. Uh, he also came for that conference. So some of these conferences were very successful, particularly the Singapore one, because more than, I think, every alumni basically made it there, whoever was in Singapore. And the alumni network is strong, particularly in Asia. And we were able to unlock a lot of new first-time companies, which then came to campus, and we had a pretty successful placement season that year. And it was the first time we had a good one, because in the 2009 placement season was a whitewash because of the global recession. 2010 was hard as well. The world was still recovering. But 2011, we just went full charged. We said we have to do well. We have no choice. The placement committee was a super committed bunch. We worked very hard, I think, and we had a great, a flying year. So those are the memories, man. Yeah.
And of course, being a 2011 pass out makes you one of the youngest awardees.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So how does what does the award itself mean to you, and what does it feel like being one of the youngest?
Um, the award, of course, is very, very humbling to receive. I think to get it from my alma mater, it means a lot. I would say it's probably the most important award that I have got till now. Um, I also got the Young Alumnus Award from IIT Kanpur, and that is also, I would say, both are very dear to my heart. And Ahmedabad had a very shaping experience. As I mentioned, I was this sort of clueless engineering student who didn't know how hard he could work till I entered. And I think they forged you like steel in in those 2 years. So at the end of it, I was, um, battle hardened because it was a tough 2 years, but a lot of learning, a lot of great learning, both in classroom, but I would say equally importantly outside the classroom as well. Um, and therefore, to be recognized by the institution for some of the work that I have done through Urban Company in the last 10 years means a lot. Um, I don't think it's an award just for me. I think it's an award for the whole company, and all the people who work in the company, and our vision of the company, which is to empower millions of service professionals worldwide to deliver services at home like never experienced before. That's our vision. Um, and the first goalpost in that vision is to get to 1 million service professionals who can serve millions of consumers in India and elsewhere in India, very high quality and reliable home services. We are still far away from that vision, so we are still a very small company, and we think it's very early years for us. Um, so had this award come, 5 or 10 years later, when we would have been a publicly traded, much larger and much more impactful company, I it would have seemed well deserved. Right now, um, I think it's both humbling as well as almost feels a bit undeserved to me, but I still, accept it with full humility and gratitude. And I just think that, now over the next 5 to 10 years, I have to work really hard. The company has to grow immensely, both in terms of size, but also in terms of its corporate social responsibility and being a good corporate citizen, one of the most important lessons we've been taught at IIMA, um, so that we can be deserving of this award.
So you co-founded Urban Clap in 2014.
Yes.
Uh, and so what were you up to from 2011 to 2014, aside from of course, one of your earlier ventures, Cinema Box?
So straight from campus, I joined the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, and I worked for about 2 years in their office in Bombay, and then for about 7 or 8 months in their office in Singapore, and then towards the last 3 or 4 months, I worked in Delhi. In between, I also visited for a project, spent some time in Germany. Um, So I spent about 3 years in totality with BCG across different offices, working on a variety of different projects and industries. I started off with construction, then I did some work in clean energy, moved on to commercial vehicles and spent a considerable amount of time in commercial and passenger vehicles. Um, then did some time in financial services, then moved to telco. In the middle, I did some work in power. And towards the end, I came back to do some work in banking. So as you can see, all over the place. There's no real theme to my time at BCG. I think the theme was um, be out there, try different industries, try different sectors, work on some of the most challenging and interesting problems that India Inc. and more globally some of the leading companies in the world face, and the vantage point that BCG provides to really work on the most strategic topics with the senior leadership of these companies was um, something that I valued a lot and I learned a lot from. Um, and I mean BCG has one of its values is to chart your own course as an individual, and that's exactly what I did in the 3 years that I was there. Um, I was, I was charting my own course, doing different things across different markets, and by the end of those 3 years, I felt that my course was different, and it was to actually be an entrepreneur. So I moved on to do that.
So that gave you a a broad expanse of exposure, of course, and dealing with so many industries, so many sectors, and so many geographies. So obviously that helped you. But what was it that that was that tipping point which sort of pulled you away and said, now this is the time. Now I'm done with this. Now I do need to move on to something much more interesting.
Yeah, so I think it happened over a period of time. Um, I would say the first time I considered entrepreneurship seriously was in my second year at Ahmedabad. Um, at the time, I was talking to my co-founder now, Varun, who was working in Qualcomm in San Diego. He was my batchmate at IIT, and we discussed a bunch of ideas. One of them we really liked. It was in the edtech sector, but somehow we were not able to get started back then. And we felt that we should get some more experience under our belt before we start out. But pretty much throughout the 3 years that I was with BCG, Varun and I kept exchanging notes and kept talking about what we could do together and what we could create. Um, and these conversations were sporadic, um, but they added up over time. Eventually, I think when I was about 2 years into BCG, I had decided that it was time to move on. Um, and then, Varun and I decided to return to India because at the time I was in Singapore, and start thinking more actively together about what we could build. So we returned to India in October of 2013. Both of us, came in about a week of each other. Varun was also working in BCG at the time, um, and then we started, while still at BCG, we started to think about what we could do together. Towards the end of our stint at BCG, we started a company in a very different space, which you've highlighted. It was called Cinema Box. It was in the travel entertainment space. We were creating entertainment devices for long haul travel, buses and trains and planes, largely buses. But that idea, didn't really take off. There were a lot of learnings on how to think about businesses, how to think about scalability and profitability, more importantly, moats and competitive advantage. and what really is a good business versus just a lifestyle business. Nothing against lifestyle businesses, but what could really be like we wanted to create when we our vision to start out was to create a company that could change the world, and a company that could be a truly global institution, an institution that would outlive all of us. And our first company was not going to be that. That became clear to us. The day it became clear to us, we didn't waste any time. We moved on. We shot it lock, stock, and barrel. We thankfully had not spent a lot of time. We were able to see the writing on the wall in a few months. And even though we had lost some time and some money, and it's always hard to sort of give up on an idea that you've been working on for some time. I think we were quite pragmatic and objective about the whole thing, which is very helpful, I feel, in entrepreneurship. It's important to be emotional, but the emotions have to be channelized and held within the guardrails of pragmatism and objectivity. So I think that helped. And then we started thinking afresh with clean mind about what we could do next. And over a few months of market study, soul searching, thinking, ideating, we arrived at the idea of UrbanCompany. Back then, it was called Urban Clap.
So, from learning to be a good entrepreneur to creating thousands of micro entrepreneurs through a single platform, through Urban Clap, how has the journey been? I mean, there of course was a long list of challenges to deal with. To mention a few, operating in a category that few prefer to work in, right? And working with the informal sector with all its associated, challenges like lack of quality and service standardization, low skill levels, lack of consistency and punctuality, customer complaints, and service providers being at the mercy of middlemen that eat into the margins, all those things, right? So how has the journey been, right from inception of that idea to you know to where you are now? So how would you describe it?
It hasn't been a straight line walk. I can tell you that. It outside in might feel like it was a straight line upwards, but I think it has been, you know, two steps forward, one step back, one step to the left, largely forward. It has been a challenging journey. I think we had to do lots and lots of micro pivots, lots of mutations to our business and operating model, try different things, try different categories, try different services, try different models. Eventually, I think what we zeroed in was on a couple of large verticals within home services, beauty, and home repairs and maintenance. We zeroed in on a model where we go deep with our service partners. So we train them, we standardize, all the equipment and tools and products they use. We standardize the pricing and the deliverables and the SOPs. Um, we control the service delivery through technology. We rigorously select each of these people. We provide them loans, bank account opening, insurance, branding, and of course, all of their jobs, etc., come through our company. So I think this was what we call a full stack or a fulfillment led approach. Uh, and I think that approach really and that model really changed the game for us because, as you mentioned, in a category which lacks standards, which lacks um, transparency in pricing, which lacks quality control, this model allowed us to go to the end consumer with the promise of a consistent, standardized, high quality service experience every time. And it still breaks from time to time, but by and large, I think we've done a decent job there. We have a long way to go, and as you were asking me the question, one of the things I felt was how how little a distance we have traversed and how far we still have to go. So I still think that while there have been challenges that we have been able to overcome in the last 6 years, I still think of us as a very small company which is just starting out. At least I feel that way, as an entrepreneur. I know many entrepreneurs say that it's almost a cliche these days to say that, Bezos has made the words day one very famous, where he says that it's day one. But for me at least, I genuinely feel that way. I feel that in a sector like ours, there's a lot to be done, and I feel we have just scratched the surface of what is possible and what we could do. Um, I think there is a lot of effort that we will have to put in, a lot of rigorous training, quality control, processes, technology across categories that we play in today and other categories we don't play in today, across cities where we are present and many, many, many cities where we're not present. So the next 10 years are very exciting. Um, as we do that, I think there will be many, many, many challenges we encounter. Our ability to overcome them will define the kind of company we create. And that's something that I'm super excited by and super pumped by the future and what it holds. At some point in the journey, we'd like to take the company public sooner rather than later, and that is also an important milestone for the team, for our investors, and for all our other stakeholders. So the very exciting times, I would say, in the next few years ahead of the company.
So you've already touched upon one of the questions that I was, going to ask. I mean, so technology is definitely going to be a big portion of what you're going to be doing, and lot more of that is going to, come into the solution part of it. But at the end of the day, there are these service providers who are going to deliver these services, and there is a lot of it going to be in terms of the human element of it. How do you deal with people? How do you make their lives meaningful?
Right.
Uh, and so, I mean, you've also, you've also mentioned somewhere that, of course, dealing with all of these challenges means that, you've had to verify professionals, and you've had to do that both on the, on the background front, but also on the skill set, right? And
Right.
before you allow them to offer their services on the app, which only meant that about 20 to 30% made the cut. Now, you also said that it's been one of the most complex challenges, onboarding these service providers by telling them that they need to be on your platform, but they're not good enough, right? So how did you deal with that at the point when you actually had that realization that that's what you needed to do?
I think thankfully for us from very early on, one of the things we were always very clear about was that if we have to win, we can't just have a great experience for customers. We have to have a great experience for service partners as well, or service professionals. And the proof of the pudding of a great experience is earnings. If service professionals earn a lot more on your platform than what they do outside, more and more are going to come. Word of mouth is going to be strong. Referrals is going to be strong. Average earnings on our platform today are between 30 to 35,000 rupees a month in India, which is almost double of what service professionals would make in the offline world. But this is the average. This takes into account professionals who work flexibly, professionals who have other commitments, etc., particularly women professionals. If I take the top 30 or 40% of professionals in every category, they would typically make more than 50,000 rupees a month. And that would be a significant multiple of their opportunity cost and what they would make in the offline world. This, coupled with a whole host of other benefits that we provide, whether it's life insurance, accidental insurance, and health insurance free of cost, whether it's access to loans, both starter loans, but also home loans, personal loans, vehicle loans, at very, very competitive rates from our NBFC partners, whether it's access to free training and upgradation opportunities, whether it's access to genuine and high quality tools and consumables and products at cheaper than retail market prices. All of these things become a significant input into substantially improving the quality of experience for the profession. We have the saying internally: happy professionals is equal to happy customers. um, and generally, if you've used Urban Company, one of the things you'll notice the profession in many a times, in this new day and age, people who come to your home for delivery, this that, will always crib. But when it comes to Urban Company, one of the things you'll notice if you talk to professionals, and to anybody viewing, right, they should to do, is they're largely happy. Many times they will themselves tell you, how happy they are and how much of a difference Urban Company has made in their life. in large part because of the earnings delta, which gives them a decent middle class existence. It's very important, right? The threshold of 30,000 rupees a month and crossing that threshold gives them decency of life, gives them a middle class existence. But also all the other benefits, which now allows them to focus on what they do well, which is provide services, knowing fully well that there is the safety net of UrbanCompany, which is taking care of them. So this is what led to amazing word of mouth, strong referrals. Almost 100% of our service professionals come through referrals and word of mouth. And as a result, we have that number has accelerated in the pandemic when people have lost their jobs in the offline world. So it does put us in a point of in a place where we have the benefit of choice, um, and we typically tend to accept and onboard only about 20 to 30% of the professionals who apply to us. But we are doing more for the ones who don't make the cut. We are doing intensive training. We are doing deeper training programs to upgrade their skills. In the long run, we want everybody to work on UrbanCompany, if it is possible. Everybody in the services sector at least, and we want to be able to enable that through technology, but also through all of the processes that I spoke about.
Mm. So, I mean, so one of the biggest pulls is of course the higher potential for earnings, and of course all the other services and the other benefits that you are able to provide as a company. Um, but the higher earnings is obviously a function of the price point. And is that going to be a challenge when you try to move into the primarily the tier 3 towns?
I don't think at this point of time we are a solution for tier 3 India. I think we're a solution for tier 1 and tier 2 India, which is the top 50 metros. Maybe, I am short sighted and can't see a future today beyond 50, 60 cities in India for our kind of service. I actually think it's a very large market, even in the top 50, 60 cities. But at this point of time, I don't see a market for us outside of the top 50, 60 cities. I think the juice was just won't be worth the squeeze. And we'd rather focus our energies on international markets, global markets, as we are doing Singapore, Australia, UAE, looking to enter Saudi. So I think we would be focused on tier 1 and tier 2 India and international. That's how we think of our strategy.
And in the Indian context, do you see any additional challenges coming up? For example, in the whole debate about employee versus non-employees and contractors in that sense, do you see any policy related challenges coming up, or what direction do you see the policy developing, obviously internationally as well as in India? Because we are obviously tracking policy elsewhere, and there have been lots of other examples with Uber and the others uh, facing similar issues elsewhere.
Well, India is at the forefront of the policy development. Last year, the government passed in the parliament the Social Security Code of 2020, and it has recognized gig workers as a formal labor class and the third formal labor class outside of formal and informal workers, and identified a whole host of rights for gig workers and platform workers, as well as constituted the Social Security Fund for gig workers. Um, all companies like UrbanCompany, Amazon, Flipkart, uh, Uber, Ola, Swiggy, Zomato, which employ, uh, if employ could be the term we use, gig workers, or rather have gig workers working on that platform, are required to contribute a percentage of their revenues to the Social Security Fund. And then the Social Security Fund extends a bunch of benefits, which so far maybe the platforms were independently extending, um, whether it's around insurances, life and health, or maternity benefits or other benefits to the gig workers. In fact, there is conversation of extending all the benefits of ESIC to gig workers. Um, so I think the policy on India is now clear. And in fact, India is the first company in the world, country in the world, to clarify its stance on the policy. And it's a very forward looking regulation, which Dara Khosrowshahi, the CEO of Uber, himself lauded after Uber ran into some policy issues in California. And India's stance is very clear that we recognize gig workers as a formal third class of workers outside of formal and informal workers. And they have special rights, and companies have to comply by the policy framework. This is now an act of parliament, so it is the law of the land. We were both involved in providing our inputs into the policy and continue to be involved with the Labour Ministry in providing our inputs into the gig fund. We think it's one of the best things that has happened. It has both clarified policy, and certainly no entrepreneur wants to operate in a environment of policy uncertainty. So it has made the policy certain and the regulation certain. It has made our role and our responsibility as a platform clear. Um, and it has extended benefits to gig workers, which were earlier only discretionarily provided by platforms, and now through the gig fund will be a right for every gig worker, which is amazing. Um, and I think we are very happy with the example that India has set for the rest of the world to follow. And it is certainly an example uh, I mean, typically India follows the world when it comes to best practices and regulations, and sometimes not even the best practices. But in this case, like with several other things that this government is doing, I think it has really shown the way on what is, globally best in class policy. So we're very happy and supportive of the new policy by the government.
And how has it been elsewhere abroad? I mean, so you are in obviously UAE, Australia, Singapore, going into Saudi Arabia. What's the experience been like? And did you make any changes to some of the elements in the business model before you went international, or are you doing anything differently over there?
Absolutely. I think, look, as a company, we're quite committed to complying by both the letter of the law as well as the spirit of the law in every market that we operate. And for us, our we're not wedded to business models. We're wedded to delivering phenomenal world-class services to our end consumers, whatever gets us there in whichever market. The model itself is not the end goal. The end goal is amazing, phenomenal, high quality services to end consumers while being compliant with local regulation and local laws. And that's what we've tried to do in every market that we've entered into.
And wasn't it around that same time when you were looking to go international when you did the name change as well, right, from Urban Clap to Urban Company? And of course, uh, that of course was part of a broader issue, right, a broader move, but also things like customer trust issues, which are vastly different across regions, right? So that was one of the things obviously that must have figured into how you want to deal with those markets, right?
Yes, I think whenever a company goes international, it is forced to do a bunch of things, including significantly up its game as far as product and service is concerned, because now you're competing at an international level, and your product or service has to be world class. Um, Not to say that if you're in India, you should have anything less. I think Indian consumers also deserve world class services and products. But as you go international, you're now genuinely competing, and you can see if your model, your product, and your service is globally competitive. And so with that, you have to bring in changes in the way you operate, in the DNA of the company sometimes as well. Um, One of these changes was also just our name. We felt that Urban Company was a much more internationally accepted name, much more global brand name, and it allowed us to have a brand architecture which over time could support sub brands in the spheres of beauty, home, etc. So that was the thought process, and which is why the rebranding was done pretty much in sync with launching a couple of markets globally.
And are there any learnings that from these markets that sort of feed back into the India market, or will it work on in a sort of a different model for the foreseeable future?
No, we have phenomenal cross pollination between teams. Lots of exchanges of ideas, learnings. The core model is actually quite consistent across different markets. The technology and product is the same. Um, and we leverage our global markets to improve our service in India, and we leverage our India market to improve our services globally. So all of this is very much in sync. Yeah.
So what's next for Urban Company?
Well, I wish I had a very interesting answer to tell you, but I think the next is more of the same. Over the next 10 years, we want to supercharge the company, grow it 50 to 100 times, take it global, take it public, keep building delightful, memorable service experiences for our customers, so that our customers love us and they keep repeating on the app, and in the process create millions of high quality middle class jobs for service professionals, and bring them decency of life. So that's our goal post, and we want to keep working towards it over the next 10-15 years, and hopefully we can get there.
And you said that in 2014, Urban Clap was the right idea, right time. Of course, Urban Company now. Yet, few people have ventured into the unorganized sector and made it a household name, right? And you've addressed the business side of it, but is there something about you that makes you take the road few have taken? As in, few may know about your CrossFit workouts, love for adventure sports such as skydiving, including accelerated free fall, scuba diving, trekking, etc., and activity-based vacations. So, is there a personality trait here that makes you seek adventure in all its forms?
No, man. I think some of this is media and a little bit overrated. I think I'm a regular guy, with just a larger than life ambition, and I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team which sees the vision. I think a lot of what we have, or whatever little we have accomplished till now, has been largely the team. There's always sort of one person who becomes the face of the company, but it is not me. It is the team. It is their hard work. It is their commitment to the vision, and you know, um, I mean, they keep me on my toes, right? I may be the founder and CEO, but if I don't if I'm not prepared, ahead of meetings, ahead of discussions, if I'm not good at what I do, my team is pretty brutal. I can tell you that. There are some very, very smart and intelligent folks in my team, much smarter and more intelligent than me, who would, call a spade a spade. Uh, I had one discussion about an hour back with someone who used to report into me and now reports into someone else. And he told me, what, he actually reports into also an Ahmedabad alum who's about 9 years senior to me from IIMA. And he said, after working for this great guy who you hired, I realized what a bad manager you were. So, I get brutal feedback from my team all the time, and it helps me to, it keeps me grounded, helps me to stay humble and realize that, I mean, we have a long way to go. We are still a very small company. And I don't think, I mean, I'm, just a fairly regular guy in that sense.
Abhiraj, great talking to you. When was the last time you were on campus?
I was on campus, I think about 2 or 3 years back. I took a lecture for a particular course that
Managing
a good,
digital businesses, I believe. Right?
yes, correct. So a good friend of mine, Manu Midha, is a visiting professor for that course. And he invited me to come over and speak in that course. And I think this was about 2018, so about 2.5, 3 years back. So I was on campus. That was the last time. Yeah.
Well, we'll love to have you back. Unfortunately, we are doing this online this time, but whenever you have the time, do come over, and we'd love to have you back and have the students interact with you. And it was great talking to you, Viraj. And
Absolutely.
good luck with everything. You have a long journey ahead. You've already achieved a lot, but I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about you and from you. So Godspeed and good luck.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.